Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for part two of the tribute to Coach Dye, where we interview his former players, so everybody can get a better perspective just on how much Coach Dye meant to Auburn, how much he meant to his players, to the fan base, and to the families of his players. And I think by doing this, obviously his memory will live on, regardless, because he's touched so many lives. But I think this gives a lot of guys to an outlet, in a tough time, to be able to talk about somebody that you'll hear, Ben Tamburello, who we have on today, said that was him and his father were the most influential people in his life. So again, it is a somber occasion, but I think it's also a time, to celebrate Coach Dye's life, because it was an amazing life. What he did was amazing. The amount of people that he helped is amazing. And just a little background on Ben Tamburello. He was an All-American center at Auburn, All-SEC at Auburn, won the Ken Rice Award for the best blocking lineman in 1984. Played in the NFL for a little bit with the Eagles, and just an all-around great guy and a great representation of Auburn. So I appreciate you guys joining us for the second part. The third part that we'll release tomorrow is actually with the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill offensive line coach, Stacy Searles, who was another decorated offensive lineman at Auburn and a guy that is, synonymous with Coach Dye and his team. So again, like I say every time, you guys make this show what it is. I appreciate y'all, and I think everybody coming together during this time, and obviously condolences to the Dye family from everybody, including myself and the Crane family. So again, thank you guys for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the show. This is part two of the tribute to Coach Dye with Ben Tamburello. Talk to y'all soon. All right, everybody. I want to thank you again for joining us on part two of our tribute to Coach Dye, where we're interviewing, former players, and we got a daggum good one here. Ben Tamburello, All-American, All-Decade team, in my opinion, the best center to ever play at Auburn, and just a guy I have a lot of respect for, and is a huge success. And Mr. Ben, I appreciate you joining us.
Oh, Jake, thank you for the invitation. I appreciate you inviting me.
Definitely. Well, let's get right into it. Obviously, you knew Coach Dye really well, and I'm going to shut up and kind of let you just talk for a minute about, what Coach Dye meant to you and what he meant to Auburn.
Man, Jake, I've thought about that so much, to kind of encapsulate what he meant to me. It's really hard to articulate. I went back and looked at some of his videos after some of the games, and the one thing I think one video that really captured the way I felt is the speech he made after the Iron Bowl that was played at Jordan here for the first time in 1989. And he said, "Ain't no way. I ain't smart enough to tell you how I feel about you. It's family, and you know it." And it was perfect, because it tells you that there's no way that you could measure everything that man did for me during my lifetime, the things I've passed on to my children. I know your dad passed these same traits, disciplines on to you. And it's a legacy. And it's a legacy that you'll pass on. And he just meant as much. I just unfortunately my dad passed away back in March. And then, of course, Coach Dye passed away yesterday. Those two men were the most influential people in my life.
Yeah. And can you, Mr. Ben, do you mind kind of talking about just, and I talked with Benji Rowland about this yesterday, and a lot of coaches have styles. What would you say was Coach Dye's style, if you had to put it in a category like that? Could you do that?
Hard-nosed. I think one of his mantras was, he may not be the smartest, but he's going to get there first, and he's going to stay last. Yeah. And I think everything about the personality of Coach Dye kind of filtrated through the team. And I think if you look at those teams in the 80s, they were physical, they were hardworking. He pushed you beyond what you thought you could do, so overachieving in some ways. Also, he always explained that there was no easy way. There just weren't any shortcuts. And that was something that through preparation, you knew that you were prepared if you were a Coach Dye team. And so I think other coaches respected him for that. But always, you were not going to be out physical. You were going to be the toughest guy on the field. You will have worked the hardest. May not have been the most talented or smartest, but it's the intangible items that he always talked about. And those items were hard work, preparation, pushing yourself beyond what you think you can do, that type of thing.
Yeah, and again, I think that's a great way to encapsulate it if it's at all possible. But can you kind of talk about, Mr. Ben? I whenever you, and again, obviously I'm biased, but whenever you see a guy that played for Coach Dye and played in that era, there's always something kind of this. They feel like they have this extra edge about them. Did you, when you got done playing for Coach Dye, even up till now? I wear that kind of as an extra badge of honor. Obviously, it's such a huge honor playing for Auburn, but not only playing for Auburn, but playing for Coach Dye during that era, that's got to add a little extra fuel, to the tank when you're walking around. And not saying arrogance or anything like that, but I mean, it's a big deal.
It is. One of the things I think that measures how respected his program was that is the NFL Combine and the NFL scouts. They knew when they drafted an Auburn football player that he was going to be smart, he was going to be hardworking, he was going to be tough. And that's what they would say. That was the book. I mean, Auburn players came out of that program and they were tested. And I think, the challenges that we had during those 4 years of playing football, they do test you. And you learn to push yourself beyond. You learn to set goals, maybe higher than what you think you can do. All these life lessons that he taught. And that's one thing I think about Coach Dye. He knew football was important, obviously. But he also knew that it was a lesson that you could learn about what's to come in life. And I can remember different speeches that he made during, after games or practices, and he would talk about life. And one in particular, the 1983 Sugar Bowl, where we won the SEC championship, he told a story about how one day you're going to have struggles in your life and you're not going to have teammates around you. And you're going to look back on this day and you're going to draw strength from it. But he was always trying to teach you. And as important as football was, he knew that the most important thing was getting you to become a man and getting you to build a foundation off of that experience that he forged.
Yeah, and again, kind of in that same category or vein, can you just talk about just the grind that it was to play for Coach Dye and just the lifestyle of a collegiate football player at Auburn in the 80s? Just, do you mind just talking about how much time and how much different it was then than obviously it is now?
Well, you didn't have a lot of restrictions as far as time on the field. I know your dad and I, my senior year and your dad's, Kurt Crane's junior year, we actually had 4 days before the season. We practiced 4 times a day for, it must have been a week or so. And I don't think you could do that now. The contact that you had, one-on-one drills and physical drills, the heat, it was tough. And the grind, definitely. I think one unique thing about Auburn when we were there in the 80s, we were on the quarter system. And so school didn't start till the middle of September, but the football players would come back to Auburn University in mid-August. So you were there a month.
Yeah. Yeah, and they used every inch of it, I bet.
We used every minute of every day. That's what you did with football. So it has changed a great deal. Even that part of it, the quarter system's now gone to semesters. So at least you have people around you that are going to school. And that helps. When you're just doing football, that is a grind, like you put it.
Yeah, you're almost isolated, and it's obviously it's not prison, but it's kind of there's some similarities that you could draw. But could you, Mr. Ben, could you tell our audience? I know some stories you can share, some you can't. Can you give us a great Coach Dye story that you were there for, whether it be funny, whether it be emotional? Just what you mind giving me one?
Absolutely. There's so many of them. It's hard to pick one, but I think in light of his passing, my memory of him is how he was such a great motivator. And I think that he could do that in a way that you just didn't want to let him down. And an example would be my senior year, I was a captain. And one of the really cool things about Coach Dye, before a game, we'd come out a little bit early. They would play the national anthem. We weren't on the field at that time, but that was our cue that we could come out and walk into the tunnel and kind of get ready to run onto the field. And he was always out there in the front. And he would always, kind of hold people back, and then, all right, let's go. But I can remember a couple of big games that Coach Dye looked at me, and I felt like he was just talking to me. He said, "Come on, Ben." And it might have been an Alabama game or a Florida, Georgia, but that would resonate with me the entire 3.5 hours or so of the game. And I would think about how much those 2 words meant to me and how I didn't want to let him down.
Yeah.
And it's important sometimes to understand a true leader and the way that he leads through example. And after 4 years or almost 4 years of being under his tutelage and his program, he could just say 2 words to me, and I would give everything I had for him. That probably is the most meaningful thing for me in my memory of him, is that that's how much he meant to me.
Yeah, and again, obviously, it's such an emotional game, and the amount of time that you guys invest and the coaches invest and the time away from, your family and their family, all really for 11, 12, 13 Saturdays in the fall. Is there a game or is there a moment during a game, whether it be a win or a loss, that sticks out in your mind?
I think the greatest memory I have of a game within my senior year when we beat Alabama 21-17. We came from behind. Lawyer Tillman ran the reverse at the end, and it was just an epic way to end our season. That was a season in '86 where we didn't have high expectations. It was kind of a rebuilding year, but we went 10-2. We beat Alabama, our arch rival. We played USC in the Citrus Bowl. We won that game, and we finished in the top 6 in the country.
Yeah.
And if you look at that year and you look the next 3 years, your dad's senior year, 87, 88, and 89, Auburn won the SEC championship 3 consecutive years.
Yeah.
So it was one of those years. It was a building year. That game really, I think, probably sprung not just our season forward, but the next 3 seasons to be the champions that they were. And I think that game will always be my favorite memory, because I can remember in that particular game, I called the coin toss in the Iron Bowl. And I think you probably know, your dad's probably told you, I grew up as an Alabama fan.
Yeah.
I was recruited by Bear Bryant. And my first football game ever was at Legion Field on my birthday in 1972. And walking out there on Legion Field and representing Auburn, my teammates, my coaches, the Auburn family, against a team I'd grown up watching play in a place where I'd seen my first football game, that was that same game. And so just a wonderful experience, a great memory.
Yeah. And I want to stay. So the play's called, it's the reverse to Tillman. You're at center. Honestly, how did you feel about it?
I loved it.
You loved it.
I loved it. The thing about it was I had a big, strong nose guard against me, Kurt Jarvis. He was all ACC. We played against each other 4 years because he started every year as well. And a reverse, a misdirection, that's always a lineman, that gives you a little bit of a break,
Yeah.
But I knew that it was going to be a play that would work. I just had that feeling. I was excited that we had kind of the guts to call it. And of course, the story goes that Scott Bolton was supposed to be in there, but the transition, the change of the players didn't happen, and Lawyer Tillman knew what to do, and it worked out perfectly. So, I think it was one of those things that was meant to be. It was one of those games that we were going to win, and it was just so important, especially my last year.
Yeah.
So it just another great memory.
Now getting back to Coach Dye for a second, could you tell the difference when, before the game or the week of practice when y'all were playing Georgia and Alabama as opposed to, Mississippi State and Arkansas, or what, was he just the same all the time? I would think that those weeks, especially with his past, especially Georgia, there's probably a little extra juice.
It is, I think, just in the air automatically. You just have that extra kind of, step, or you just know the importance of the game. But honestly, the way that he prepared you, it was almost like a faceless opponent. I mean, you were truly competing within yourself, and you were trying to get better during practice. And obviously, we had some of the greatest players to practice against. I mean, when I was at Auburn, we had your dad was one of the greatest linebackers to play at Auburn. We had Tracy Rocker, Ron Stallworth, Benji Rowland. I mean, on and on and on. And so obviously every week was a challenge during practice because they were there. Those are the ones you're going against.
Yeah.
But you always, an SEC game meant more, absolutely. But whether it was Tennessee or Alabama, well, I take that back. Alabama meant more than anything, period.
Yeah.
He used to set us down at the first of the year, and he would ask us to write our goals, write them down, and you have to share your individual and team goals. And that first team goal better be beat Alabama.
Yeah.
Because that's what you work for every single day, every week. You'd always mention Alabama. That was your cross-state rivalry, and that was who you measured yourself against. So that was number one. But so, yeah, I mean, there were some games that obviously carried more weight, but really the way he prepared you, it was pretty much the same all the time. And Jake, I'll never forget, Coach Dye was always just his greatest after the games, whether you won or lost. He always had the right thing to say. He always, even when you lost, he somehow he would make it a positive, and he would turn things around. But before every game, he would say the same things, and it was always scripted, and it was the same thing before each game. And it was 6 things you got to do to win a football game. It was the starting lineups on both sides of the ball. I mean, that part of it was automatic.
Yeah.
But it was always the best part was the emotional part after either a big win or a very disappointing loss. And that's when you see all these videos of Coach Dye when he's at his best. But before the games, pretty much as far as practice, whoever it was, it didn't matter. We did the same things, the same drills. Before the games, he had the same talks. There was no individual talks for each opponent. It was all the same. It was after the game that you really got to hear him and see how he felt, and that was the case, with Coach Dye.
Yeah, and again, it's something too. Like I mentioned earlier, it's so hard to keep yourself composed. Especially I always thought it was a lot harder as a coach, honestly, because you can't go out there and play anymore. But kind of speaking of that, because I wanted to ask you this because I think a lot of former players do this, and my father did it. Will you ever just, if you're walking by a TV, because if we used to walk by a TV and like the '86 Iron Bowl was on or something, he would start watching it, and it was like he'd just go into another world until it was over. I mean, he'd be calling out every play. He'd be dog cussing guys on the other team. Do you ever just sit down and like get back in that zone just for a little bit?
Yeah. It's really funny you asked me that because with no sports right now, and with a lot of the sports channels showing old games, SEC games,
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some of the games I played in, and you're right. You just relive it, and it's amazing how you can remember little details about a game, about conversation on the sideline, about what you were feeling in the huddle.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, it does. It was one of the greatest times of your life. It was one of the most competitive times of your life, and those memories come back to you automatically.
Yeah.
And it is watching them recently on a lot of these channels, the football, the Iron Bowls have been on, and it is, it's like you're there again, and you're experiencing all over.
Yeah. I used to tell him, I used to joke with him, you could see a meteor, about to come hit the earth and blow it up. But if the '86 or '87 Iron Bowl on, that takes precedent. But no, it's, you brought up a great point. I mean, and you were, like I said, I mean, you're a legend at Auburn. I mean, like I said, I think you're the best center of all time at Auburn. But, you guys every day were going up against the best defensive lineman that you were probably going to see the whole season. Can you just talk about, number one, just those battles and how close it brought you guys together on the offensive and defensive line? Because there's such a respect level there among the team between O-lineman and D-lineman because they know what each other goes through.
That's right. You really do. And, of course, Benji Rowland was one of my best friends down at Auburn, and Tracy Rocker as well. And obviously your dad is like a brother to me. But having to go against him or those other guys, it was tough because they were better than most opponents that we would play. So really a lot of times on Saturday after going through, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, full pads practice, full contact practice, by the time you got to the game on Saturday, it was a little bit easier. Yeah. And I think that was a really unique time to have that kind of talent at Auburn. Somebody asked me yesterday about Auburn and being known for great defenses, great defensive linemen, linebackers, great running backs. And Coach Dye believed in a strong running game and a great defense. And so that's what he recruited. We had the best running backs in the country. We had more than we could use.
Yeah.
And of course we had the 80s defensive linemen, just incredible. Yeah. And of course linebackers. I mean, when your dad, you put Kurt Crane, Greg Carr, Kevin Green. I mean, there's some guys that they were just quarterbacks on the field. They were terrific football players, tough guys, and we saw them every day. Yeah. You know, so when we played an opponent, obviously it was a little bit of a break sometimes. Thank goodness.
Yeah, and you know, you brought up being an Alabama fan and then obviously going to Auburn. When did that like switch happen? Obviously it was during recruiting. What kind of made you decide, hey, you know, I'm more Auburn than anything?
Well, what happened with me, I grew up in Birmingham. Birmingham at the time was a big Alabama town. Coach Bryant was a legend. They were winning national championships, SEC championships, had winning streaks, and just everything. And so when I got recruited, when Alabama offered a scholarship to me, at first, you know, I thought, well, this is where I've always wanted to go. But what happened, I got the opportunity to visit other schools. I visited Tennessee with Johnny Majors. I visited LSU with Jerry Stovall. I visited Auburn and Alabama. And my visit at the Alabama game was their homecoming against Southern Miss. They lost the game. Wow. And it was the first time they had lost, or that Coach Bryant had lost in that stadium ever. And so I went later to the Auburn, on my Auburn visit, and I was able to spend a lot of time with Coach Dye. And I started to look at things like my next 4 years and who I would be playing for, what my opportunity was to play, and what was on the horizon for all these teams. And really, when you really dissected it, looked at it, you didn't know if Coach Bryant was going to be around for those 4 years. You knew Coach Pat Dye was going to be there. Coach Dye was very confident. You could already tell he was turning things around. He was going to be a winner, going to be a champion. That was his goal. And you wanted to be a part of it. And obviously, I really wanted to stay in state. I'm from here. You know, if I played somewhere, I would want to play at one of the two schools here in Alabama. Mm-hmm. And it gave me insight on how special Auburn was. And obviously, I was fortunate because I made the right choice. I mean, there's no doubt. I played for one of the greatest coaches of all time, played with the Heisman Trophy winner. We won championships, met some of my best friends, met my wife. So it worked out for me. But it's a big decision when you're 18 years old. And it's something that I'm glad for me it worked out and everything fell together. I'm just thankful to God that everything worked out the way it did.
Yeah, and now I want to pivot a little bit to, you know, as we're winding down here, kind of talk about where Auburn is right now. I talked a little bit with Benji Rowland yesterday. Where do you see Auburn at right now as a program, and what do you kind of expect going into 2020?
Well, I like it. I feel like Auburn continues to be competitive in this unbelievable SEC West. Yeah, and you know, year in, year out. And obviously Alabama is back where they're almost a standard that you have to beat them to win the SEC. And we're going to play them every year. But I look at what Coach Malzahn has done and the fact that he's had such great success. His players conduct themselves well on and off the field. I'm proud of them. Yeah. And I know how difficult it is to win a championship, an SEC championship in particular. We only won one when I was there, and it was tough. And I know that you can't. It's hard to do it every year. It's hard to be, you know, the best team in the SEC every year. Mm-hmm. But we're always competing for it. And I think as long as you're doing that, I think that if you run a program like Coach Malzahn does, and we've had some great recruits. Obviously, I've been watching your information. We're getting some great signings.
I appreciate that.
Well, you seem to know what's going on, and I'll follow it. So, it looks like we're signing the people we need to, the quality type people that we need to. And I'm always excited. I'm an Auburn fan, man. I played, but I'm an Auburn fan, and I don't. if you ask me about Auburn, it's going to be positive. I feel like they're doing the best they can. I'm fans, and I just hope the chips fall our way, and we'll have some good breaks, and I know we can win another championship.
Definitely, and you got to have the breaks go your way. You know that better than anybody. But last question, Mr. Ben. I just this is one I'm always very interested to see the answers from guys. What if you could sum it up? And I know it's tough. What does Auburn mean to you? What does it mean to Ben Tamburello? When you whittle it down, what does it mean to you?
It was where I learned to become a man. It's where I learned to become successful in whatever you're doing, to commit yourself, to prepare, to establish goals. It was where I made friendships that have lasted me for a lifetime, and not more than friendships, teammates and brothers, just like your dad. I mean, it was a foundation for me in my life, and it's the lesson that was taught to me, I've passed on to my children. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think about something I learned at Auburn under Coach Pat Dye on that football field that I apply to every day. I mean, if I'm going to work out and I don't want to do it, it's like you said before, I still go, because it's the discipline of knowing when you're young and you're a football playing football for Coach Dye, you do things you don't want to do.
Yeah.
You either get worse or you get better. You don't stay the same, is what he said. And so it's driven in me now.
Yeah.
The small details of trying to do things right. So it was a foundation would be the word. A great foundation in every aspect of my life.
I think that's an awesome way to put it. And Mr. Ben, I really appreciate you joining us. I got to have you back on before the season. I know you're a busy man, but again, I appreciate you coming on, and it means a lot.
It's my pleasure, Jake. Best wishes.
Yes, sir. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Ben. Talk to you later. Bye.
Warrior.
All right. That was Ben Tamburello, all-decade, All-American NFL draft pick, center for Auburn. I really appreciate him joining us, just talking about Coach Dye. And again, it's it's nice to be able to hear these stories and like I said, give you guys a perspective from, on the field and off the field and what it meant, to play for Coach Dye. So again, I thank you guys for joining us. Remember, you can find us on Twitter, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I also want to thank IBN, the Investor Brand Network. We are signing a contract with them for PR, and we're really excited. So again, I thank you guys for joining us, and catch part 3 tomorrow with North Carolina offensive line coach Stacy Searles, who obviously played for Coach Dye. He's gonna kind of call us and talk to us about it a little bit, kind of like we have for the past 2 days. So again, I thank you guys for joining us. This is Jboy. Jboy is out of here.